Hello and welcome everyone. So this video part 1 shows a step-by-step guide how to enroll Windows 10 devices to Microsoft's Endpoint Manager for device management. So Endpoint Manager combines services you may know and already be using, including Microsoft Intune, Configuration Manager, Desktop Analytics, Co-Management and Windows Autopilot. So these services are part of the Microsoft 365 stack to help secure access, protect data and respond and manage risk. As shown in the diagram, we walk through the process manually and also automatically using Autopilot by hybrid joining a device so that it is visible and both joined to on-premise AD and also Azure AD. So we show obtaining the hardware hash of the device and then importing this into Endpoint Manager so the device can be automatically registered and built with the assigned policy to that device. The idea being is that this registration is performed by the OEM, reseller or distributor from which the devices were purchased, or the registration can also be done within your organization by collecting the hardware identity and uploading it manually. Also shown will be the configuration of Hybrid Azure AD Joined in AD Connect to register devices from on-premise AD to Azure AD, and the Intune connector which creates Autopilot enrolled computers in the on-premise Active Directory domain. So we've already configured and added a custom domain in the Azure tenant, cloudinspired.co.uk, and have an AD Connect sync up and running. So we won't be covering that in this video, but links are in the description going through the AD Connect piece and custom domain setup if you need them. So part 2 of this video will be released soon, going through application delivery and rollout, and part 3 will cover patching and updates to devices. So please subscribe to the channel to be notified of up and coming parts of this video series, together with technical videos on cloud and certification. Thank you. So in summary, this video will cover setting up trial licenses, different device identities, a group creation for both users and devices, Autopilot profiles, the Intune connector install piece, AD Connect, Hybrid Azure AD Joined configuration, exporting and importing hardware hashes for device registration, domain join profiles for Windows 10 devices so they're automatically added and joined to the domain, and finally with all these settings in place we register a Windows 10 device into Intune by turning it on from scratch with the out-of-box experience and looking at the steps of setup and automatic configuration of that device. So first of all, if you go to endpoint.microsoft.com to access the Endpoint Manager Admin Center, here is where we configure all of our devices within the portal. So as you can see, we don't have access due to no licensing is installed at the moment, so we can sign up for a 1-month trial of Intune for 25 users. So the links are in the description for this. So once the trial setup is complete, we now assign our Intune license within the Azure portal to our users. So normally we would create a group here for production in our on-premise AD and then add users that require a license, and then using AD Connect we would sync that group up to Azure, but as it's just a test we'll add users directly here right now. When we now go back to the portal and our licenses have been assigned, we can now see that our portal is now active and we have access now. So let's talk about the different device identities available to us. So when a device is registered in Azure AD, you have 3 device options. Azure AD Registered and Azure AD Joined are really registering devices with Azure AD and then can be managed by Azure AD and Intune. Hybrid Azure AD Joined, on the other hand, means that a device is registered with both on-premise AD, domain joined, and also Azure AD at the same time. So this allows you to manage devices via traditional on-premise AD tools like GPOs, etc., and also register it with Azure AD for management. So we will join a Windows 10 device as a hybrid Azure AD Joined later on in this video. So we will now create a group in Azure AD to enable us to apply policy to that group and add our users that have been synced from on-premise AD to Azure AD. So that group will be applied to an Intune policy. So we will use MDM enrollment so that both corporate and bring your own devices can be automatically enrolled. So to enable this, we can sign up to a free trial of Azure Active Directory Premium subscription. Also make sure that our users are added for testing. As stated before, for production we would normally sync an AD group here, but for now for testing we will just add users direct. So if we go into Azure Active Directory and then we click on MDM, and if we click on Intune, here we can check out our MDM user scope and we can add our user group here to enable our users to be discovered by Autopilot. So if we go back into Azure Active Directory, we can also check out that our Azure AD tenant allows users to be joining devices to Azure AD. And we can also request multi-factor authentication if required. And we do need to check that under enrollment restrictions that Windows MDM is allowed. So we are now ready to create our first Autopilot enrollment profile to enroll Windows 10 devices. So this will be user based. So if we go to Devices, Enroll Devices and Windows Autopilot Deployment Profiles. So let's type a profile name and if we click Next. So these settings you can see determine what our users are shown within the out-of-box experience. So this policy is user driven and joins devices as Azure AD Joined. So we have many other options here such as show or hide Microsoft licensing terms, privacy settings, but we'll leave this by default for now during this policy, and in the next section we will show where to manually add devices so they appear in Endpoint Manager. So we have the option to apply this policy to all devices or devices within a group. So we'll add our group that we created earlier on and apply it to this policy, so any users within that group get this policy applied. So if we now look in Endpoint Manager portal, we can see that we have no devices currently registered. So let's add one manually to show you where it's done for Azure AD Joined or registered devices. Device, if we right click Start, go to Settings, go to Accounts, go to Work or School. So we click Connect. And then we enter the Azure Active Directory user we wish to connect with, which is also part of the group we added to the policy. So if we enter our password, if we approve our MFA request, you can see that our Windows 10 device is now added. So if we go to Azure AD and go to devices, we can see our device listed here. And also if we go to the Intune portal or Endpoint Manager, we can also look under devices and see our device listed within Intune. So this can be covered automatically by user sign-in or group policy, or by gathering the hardware hash of the device and uploading to the Windows Autopilot service. Then when either a user signs in using their Azure AD credentials or a device hardware hash matches the uploaded hash, enrollment is done automatically of the device to a dynamic group. And that group would be assigned to an enrollment profile. So this is shown later on in the video. So the Intune connector for your Active Directory creates Autopilot Enroll computers in the on-premise Active Directory domain. So the computer that hosts the Intune connector must have the rights to create the computer objects within the domain. So we have created a Windows 10 OU where domain joined devices will be located, and now we can set delegation on that OU for the server that will have the Intune connector installed. So we right click the Windows 10 OU and then go to Delegate Control. Click Add to add our server where the Intune connector will be installed shortly. Click Add, tick Computers, enter our server name. Click Next and then choose to create a custom task to delegate. Click only the following objects and then tick Computer Objects. Tick both Create and Delete selected objects. Click Next and then click Full Control. Click Finish. Also need to check within Server Manager that the IE Enhanced Security configuration is turned to off. So now we install the Intune connector. Click Configure now. And then we can sign in with our Azure AD account and also our on-premise domain admin account, so we can register it within Azure AD. And now we can see our Intune connector is active within our Endpoint Manager portal. So now we configure AD Connect for Hybrid Azure AD Joined, which enables a device in Active Directory on-premise to register with Azure AD. We don't go through the AD Connect install here. If you want to learn how to do that, there's links in the description and videos within my channel. So if we log in with the Azure AD credentials, and then we can see an option for Hybrid Azure AD Join. So if we select that option, and we're just worried about Windows 10 devices here, so we're just going to choose Windows 10 devices. So if we choose our domain and then we click Add and then type our credentials for on-premise. Now let's add our device group to enable our devices to be discovered dynamically by Autopilot Enrolment. So this is a security group with a membership type of dynamic device. So let's choose dynamic device there from the drop down, and then if we add a dynamic query, so this query is a custom query which we can add in, which will pick up all our imported devices and hardware hashes that we import in the next section. So to manually register a device, you must first capture its hardware hash. So once this process is completed, the resulting hash can be uploaded to the Windows Autopilot service. So first of all, as shown, we need to install the Autopilot script. And then once installed, we run this command to export the hardware hash to a CSV file. So this is the results of the CSV file. So we can import this now within the portal in the next section. So within the portal, if we go to devices, and then we go to enroll devices, and then to devices, and then we can import the CSV file as shown earlier on. So let's create an Autopilot Enrolment profile that targets user-driven Hybrid Azure AD Joined devices and assigns our dynamic devices group that picks up our devices or hardware hashes of our devices we created earlier. So once we've created the profile name, if we click next, and then if we choose user devices, and then if we join to Azure AD as Hybrid Azure AD Joined. Various options you can configure here. So I'm going to choose skip AD connectivity, set that to yes. I'm going to choose to show the Microsoft software licensing terms, so I'm going to show that, and also I'm going to set my keyboard language as well. So in this section, we're going to add our dynamic device group we created earlier with all our devices registered within it, so that policy applies using this group. So during enrolment, we want to change or check to see if the enrollment status is enabled to give us the ability to show the installation status during enrolment. We're just going to tick the yes and then accept the defaults. So there are many profiles that you can actually assign to your end user devices. So in this instance, we're going to create a domain join profile, which will enable us to ultimately join our devices automatically to our Windows domain. So after we enter a profile name, we can choose our naming convention prefix. So for when devices are joined to the domain, so in this instance, anything after win10 hyphen will be randomized, and we enter our domain name, and then we choose or enter our organizational unit for on-premise AD where these devices will be joined. So in this case, it's Windows 10 OU where we set our delegation earlier. We now add in our dynamic devices group that we created earlier on, so this policy is applied to that group. And then once we're happy, we click next, and then we click create to create the domain policy. So if we didn't want to upload the hardware hash and register by device, there is a GPO available to enable Endpoint Manager enrollment using default Azure AD credentials. So we can download and install administrative templates and add these then into group policy. Again, the links are in the description below for the downloads. So we go to the installation directory where our templates have been installed, and we copy the directory and we can paste this into our sysvol directory here as shown. So if we now go into group policy management, and then we've created a policy here which we can edit. We go to policies, administrative templates, and then Windows components. And then you should see an MDM selection here. And basically we just need to enable the automatic MDM enrollment and then choose user credentials and OK. So this is a computer group policy which is applied to the Windows 10 OU where our Windows devices would be domain joined and located. So when you hybrid join a device, it means it is visible and joined to both your on-premise Active Directory and also Azure AD. Now you can hybrid Azure AD join and manage them both as well. So this way you're able to use tools such as single sign-on and conditional access while still being able to apply GPOs and other on-premise utilities. So we have created our dynamic device group which picks up our hardware hashes that we imported and automatically adds our devices to that device group. So we have applied a hybrid Azure AD Join autopilot policy to enroll devices. So here is our Windows 10 device that we've just switched on. We will now take a look at taking a Windows 10 device using the out-of-box experience by booting the device up from scratch. So it will then automatically be joined to the domain from our domain join profile we created earlier and then enrolled into Intune from the previous imported hardware hash. So first of all we type our synced Azure AD username and password. The Windows 10 device is automatically registered as a hybrid Azure AD Joined device in Azure AD as shown with its original host name out of the box. This name is then changed following our domain join profile naming convention which was win10- and then a random name. As you can see, the domain profile has now been activated, so it's on the cloud inspired domain, and also the host name is registered within our Windows 10 OU within on-premise Active Directory. So our device has now finished its out-of-box configuration and we are logged into the domain. So when we go to settings and accounts, we can see that our work or school account is configured and also joined to the Azure AD as a hybrid Azure AD Joined device. We can also see the status from a command line, so Azure AD Joined is yes and domain joined is also equals yes. And single sign-on is also configured. So when we run the company portal application within our device, we can see the device can access company resources and there are no available apps available at this time. So the next video in this series to be released shortly will cover Intune application deployment to Windows 10 devices and also patch management. So thank you very much for watching the video. Please subscribe to the channel to receive updates on new videos posted weekly. All the very best. Take care and see you in the next video. Bye for now.